conversation. And today we're super excited to welcome back one of our heroes. You could call him the godfather of the truth and freedom movement. And thank you so much for coming back, David Icke. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, mate.
It's our honor and pleasure. David, today's a special day. Your new book, The Trap, is out, and you've been writing like crazy as far as I know. I've been getting emails from your people. David is still writing. David is working on this book, and it's finished and out today. What can we expect from The Trap? I can only assume another blockbuster and absolute amazing book.
It's called The Trap, and it's subtitled What It Is, How It Works, and How We Escape Its Illusions. And, you know, I think the biggest trap, if you like, that researchers and seekers of truth can fall into is reaching at any point the idea that they've got it. We're not awake, we're awakening. So when people say, I woke up, yes, okay, but you're still awakening after that. Because as Socrates said in ancient Greece, or was supposed to have done, wisdom is knowing how little we know. And so I've always gone on that basis that whatever we think we know, there's always more to know. I mean, that's the big truth that's without question true. And so I've gone on going deeper in the rabbit hole and asking where all this is coming from, what's going on in the world today. Because I concluded a very long time ago, back in the 1990s, when I was researching this and putting together the names, dates, places level of information, that there's no way it could be orchestrated purely by people sitting around the table deciding their next move. It's much bigger than that. So how big? Where does it go? Where does it come from? And the sequence of my life since I had my initial head blown off awakening in 1991, it was a pursuit of where this came from. And it was the knowledge that what we see and therefore think we know about what's going on is only a fractional part of what there is to know. And so what I've done over the last 32 years is span out from just the daily news of events and what's happening, what Klaus Schwab has said or Gates has said or any of these people. And I want to know what's behind them. And so I've been on this journey going deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole that started off basically looking at the names, dates, places, this world, what can be seen level. And then I went deeper and I realized that beyond the Gateses and the Schwabs and what I call the global cult, the global secret society network through which this is all orchestrated, was a non-human force that was manipulating human society to its own ends. And I think that absolutely since the COVID era began, more and more people have started to realize, I've certainly experienced and noticed this, that the agenda that's unfolding is anti-human. Every area of life that is essential to humans, whether it's water, whether it's food, whether it's the atmosphere that's being changed by technologically generated radiation, even the nature of the body being manipulated by these synthetic mRNA fake vaccinations. all these different essential areas of human life are being targeted, and thus it's an anti-human agenda. And a lot more people than ever before, far more, are starting to say, well, maybe that's because, as that mad guy Icke says, behind this is a non-human force. So that's where I was looking at until the last year, when I started to go deeper, and what turned out was the trap. And I guess to start is to go back to just after the turn of the millennium, when I just got so powerfully, I kind of knowing out of nowhere that we live in a simulation. The technologically massively advanced version of a virtual reality computer game. And what came to me equally strongly was that the limits of the simulation at this level that we're aware of is the speed of light. And 20 years later, in the spring of 2021, there was an article in the mainstream scientific magazine, Scientific American, by a scientist academic, concluding, he said, that he believed we live in a simulation, and he believed that the limits of it were the speed of light, which is what I said 20 years before. And the way he explained it, and I think he's absolutely right, is that the limit of what we call the speed of light is the processing speed of the simulation. And so if you are only aware and you're mesmerized by the simulation and all the information that it's feeding us, because it's not a physical construct simulation, it's an information simulation, just like putting a headset on. Your brain is being fed information, your senses are being fed information, and they give you a different reality. Something I said way back again around the turn of the millennium was that what we call the laws of physics are actually the rules of the simulation that have been encoded into it. That's one reason why when near-death experiences leave the body, they experience a different reality. And I'll come to that in a minute, because that's very much part of what's in the trap. But it's a very different reality, and clearly from what's described, the laws of physics are very different to what they are in this level that we experience through the five senses, what I call body-mind. And this writer of this Scientific American article was making the same point 20 years later, that the laws of physics, as we call them, are actually just the encoded rules of the simulation. And as he pointed out quite rightly again, it's that you can encode whatever rules and laws that you want in your game, but you're still going to be limited by the processing speed of the computer system or whatever you're working with. And that's what he said was the speed of light. So I was long exploring all this side of things. And then in the last couple of years, as I explain in the book, it's a long story, fascinating story, mind. A lot of things have been happening to me that have been pointing me in a very clear direction. And it's this, that if we break up the different levels of reality and make it real simple, let's call this world of the scene what we call the human world. Let's call it the third dimension. There are other dimensions beyond that. Now, people often, when they think of other dimensions, they think, well, other dimensions are way out there, like way out there. And of course, in frequency terms, compared with the frequency here, compared with the frequency there, they are way out there. Some of them, they really are. Because this is a low frequency world. But there are other frequency bands, call them dimensions, which are very much closer to this one. And there's one which the spiritual arena and ancient cultures, etc., together, they call it the astral. I call it in the book the astral, yes, but I call it the fourth dimension. And then there's beyond that, there's what I call in the book the fifth dimension, and that is beyond the simulation. That is outside the simulation. So if you awaken, this is what I think awakening is. If you awaken to expand your consciousness beyond the third dimension, beyond the fourth dimension, especially the lower ends of it, which I'll come to in a second, and you start to enter the realms of call it the fifth dimension, keep it simple, you're then tapping in to information, knowledge, awareness, knowing that is not being tampered with by the simulation. And that's what we call waking up. That's when people start to see things. Why didn't I see it before? Because you were within the simulated, manipulated reality before. So you might note that I'm talking about the simulation in the third dimension, but I'm also talking about going above the fourth dimension, because that certainly a significant part of it, at least, is also in the simulation. So what this series of amazing synchronicities in my life in the last 2 years pointed me to is that this reality we can see is being manipulated, and this simulation controlled by and created by and projected from the lower levels of the fourth dimension, the lower astral, as the spiritual community would call it. And the lower astral is the realm of demons, demonic consciousness, distorted consciousness, what people call lost souls. It's a mess. It's very low vibrational, and it's very dark, and it's very confusing, and it's very chaotic. The more that I've followed the clues and uncovered more and more about this, that so clear it is that this world is being manipulated from those lower levels of what people call the astral, the fourth dimension, which means that this cult that I've been exposing for 30 years, which is behind world events and the direction of the world and the chaos that's unfolding, is actually an extension, an expression of this lower astral consciousness and the entities that reside there. And so I then started looking at what we call reincarnation, because my question then was, when I looked at the simulation part of this, and how so many people in the simulation, because of the way it's manipulated, don't have a nice time. I mean, forget the people in the Western world that are having an okay time. Vast numbers of people in the Western world are not. But up to this point, when all the systematic destruction of society is underway and the economy, but up to that point, quite a few people in the West they think that we're having a decent life. But you travel, you go to South America, you go to Central America, you go to the Middle East, you go to Africa, you go to vast parts of Asia. A lot of those people are not having a good time, and they're not having a life that they'd really like to live. So why would people, or consciousness, souls if you like, want to come here for any reason? But the second thing, if you take reincarnation, is why would they keep coming back? Oh no, I've had enough of that. You're going back there, mate? No way. But when I've looked at reincarnation, the evidence for it is very, very compelling. It's very, very, very solid when you look at the totality of it and all the experiences that people have had. So then again, following the clues which have become just part of my life in the last 32 years, I started questioning what the spirit world was, because I read a lot about people who had been regressed through hypnosis, etc., by various psychiatrists, therapists, back to what they call the between life state. In other words, between experiences in this reality. And I started reading what people were saying, and the common themes were very, very compelling. And when I was reading these things, I was thinking, but that's a hierarchical prison as well. People were talking about, oh yeah, well, then I have to go in front of elders to discuss my last life. Then I have to go to this kind of school to learn more about this, that, and the other. And you're going, what? We are consciousness. We are all that is, has been, and ever can be. We are spirit, eternal spirit, connected to all spirit. We are ultimately all that is, has been, and ever can be. What's all this about? And then I looked at reincarnation again, and I looked at the basic story of it, which we're asked to accept if you believe in it. I certainly do. I think the evidence is very good. But hold on. If you take the universe, the size of the universe as projected by mainstream science, compared with that, planet Earth is the equivalent of a billionth of a pinhead. So you're telling me that you have to keep coming back onto this billionth of a pinhead to learn lessons so that you can reach a state of enlightenment which allows you not to have to do that anymore. Right? Well, that makes no sense to me. I'm sorry. What was all infinity to explore, and you've got to do this for a billionth of a pinhead? What? So that made no sense. But on the same time, reincarnation, from the evidence that I've looked at over many, many years, does make sense that it's happening. So if I put reincarnation into another context, what if that this level of the simulation is not the only level of the simulation? What if, when you leave the body, if you leave it in a certain vibrational state, you're still in the simulation, you're just in other levels of it? And so what's happening is that people are being, or souls, consciousness, is being recycled in and out of this reality over and over again. And basically, one of the things that it's doing through all the emotional trauma, upsets, and what have you that comes from that, and the way this world is structured, is that you're giving off low vibrational emotion and thought all the time. Depression, fear, the big one, anxiety, all these low vibration emotions, resentment, hatred. And what do those emotions resonate to in frequency terms? I say to the lower levels of the astral. That's where that energy is going, because basically, to a very large extent, not absolutely in totality, but to a very, very large extent, if you can't see it, it's the fourth dimension or the lower fourth dimension. So you can feel emotion, and you can sense thought, and you can feel vibes coming off other people, but you can't see them. You can see the effect of them, but you can't see them. We can't see them because it's a lower fourth dimensional. If it's lower emotional states, it's a lower fourth dimensional expression process. And what that's doing is feeding energy into this lower astral, which is the realm of that which is ultimately manipulating the world of the seen, the human world, via people like Schwab and Gates and all these other people. When you look at this global cult, this secret society network, it is serving the interests of this lower astral, lower fourth dimensional force. And we, by the effect of that manipulation, are feeding, empowering with our energy that lower astral force, which obviously brings back the image of Morpheus in the Matrix holding up the battery and saying the machines have turned humans into one of these. People remember that first Matrix movie where you see the babies and the energy that's being generated by the babies, what have you, is feeding the machines, is empowering the machines. It's symbolically exactly what's going on. So I explore all of this in the trap, and there's a very old esoteric concept which you can find symbolized in other ways in different cultures, of what's called the ring pass not, which is perceived as an energetic barrier beyond which you cannot pass unless you are in a certain high vibrational state, which comes from your perceptual state, which comes from your self-identity state. And it's interesting that in the official story of reincarnation, you have to keep reincarnating to, quote, learn lessons, to reach a state of enlightenment, a state of frequency, which allows you to break the cycle of reincarnation. The point being that how can you learn lessons, quote, if you keep coming back into this realm with the memory of the lessons you've already learned wiped? So you're basically starting with a blank sheet of paper. I mean, you can be influenced from the subconscious by previous lives, yes, previous experiences, but you don't overwhelmingly consciously know what has happened and what you've learned. So you're starting with a blank sheet of paper. So what do you mean learning lessons? And there was a situation I experienced in 2003, when for the only time I took ayahuasca, the rainforest plant, the psychoactive drug, in a rainforest in Brazil. And for 5 hours one night, a very clear, took a female form, voice, gave me chapter and verse on the fact that this whole reality we're experiencing is an illusion. And at one point, I was shown this field, just a normal kind of field in the countryside, and there was a path, a mud path going across it. And then suddenly, people started falling out of the sky as I was watching this, and they were all falling onto the path. And they were all walking along the path, and more came, and eventually they started wearing the path away, and the path started getting deeper. And then it morphed into a record groove in one of the old vinyl records, and people were walking through this groove. It was dark, they couldn't see anything. And the implication of that, what the voice said when that picture was being shown to me, is that souls, consciousness, are coming in through reincarnation, already pre-programmed from previous pre-programming or previous programming. And they lock into the program because they've been programmed before. And so far from reaching a point of enlightenment so that you can break out of the cycle, the vast majority are going deeper and deeper into the cycle because of the effects on them in terms of self-identity and perception of this constant experience of this world in its different forms. And, for me, I've been saying this all the way through, and even though I've got deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole with the trap, the answer's still the same. We are entrapped in terms of frequency, vibration, within this trap of reincarnation and this reality, this simulation, because we are manipulated not to reach a state of awareness, thus frequency, that allows us to get out of it. And so the answer is always the same: self-identity. You are not your body. That's an expression, very controversial, I know, but I have been. That's an expression of a simulation. It's the way you are locked by the simulation into the simulation is through the body. And what they're doing now with this manipulation genetically is changing the body and making it even more of a control system by the simulation. You are not the labels of your body that we're given to self-identify. And of course, as you go deeper and deeper into this subdivision of identities, into this LGBTQ and on the bloody list of letters goes, you're creating more and more myopia personalities, which are taking you further and further away from the reality that you are all that is, has been, and ever can be. And when you reach this, and this is happening to people now, my God, it is, but it has to keep going. That's the point. We're reaching the point now where more and more people are starting to self-identify, realize, remember who and what they are. And as they do so, as you expand your self-identity from I'm Ethel on the checkout to I'm all that is, has been, and ever can be, having a brief experience called human, as that expansion of self-identity happens, so that expansion of frequency happens. It's one creates the other. And if you leave the body in a state of self-awareness, of true I, then you're out of here. You're out of the trap. And that's what they do. That's the big, big, big revelation that this cult and its non-human fourth dimensional astral masters don't want us to know.
Wow, what a journey we just took, David. I love how we asked our viewers, and we got hundreds of responses, the questions, that they want us to ask you, and you've answered about 60% of them just in this first answer here, and it absolutely aligns with what our teachings, the things that we learned from our American Indian teachers, and Christine and I, my wife and I, we have the pleasure of being given that wisdom, and it was one of the things you just said absolutely aligns with what he taught us, is that when you leave this body, there will be a light, right? Everybody describes this, the light that you walk into, and he said that's the trap. Do not.
Yes, that's all in here. Yes, absolutely.
He literally said it. Do not walk towards that first light. You'll see your relatives, you see that, but that's not the real light. He says you got to turn around, and you can only do that when you leave this body without the arrogance and the ignorance that most people accumulate in their lifetime. You got to have that vibrational state that you talk about. So it absolutely 100% aligns with what you said. I want to ask you something, because this has been at least my experience for as far as I can remember. My life has gone in certain two states that keep switching, and it's going upwards. There's always a period where I go within, and I'm called to go within, more meditation, more introspection. And I can then go through the layers and perceive, as you say, reality with a greater perspective. And then I'm called to go more on the outside and apply that to the outside world, or, disseminate information. How does that process work for you? How do you get these downloads, as you call them? Is that happening at random times, or is it happening in meditation? What is your process for that?
Well, I'd like to talk about the light as well as we go along. But
absolutely.
Yeah, what has happened to me since 1990 is that when I saw a psychic in 1990, the first psychic I ever saw, called Betty Shine, and I started being told I was going to go on a world stage and reveal great secrets, and all the stuff that's happened was coming through. This is what you're going to do. one of the things that came through from some source that she was connected with was that you are going to be led to knowledge, and at other times will put knowledge into your mind. And basically, you'll just know something. You won't know why you know it. And that has absolutely been what has happened to me in the last 32 years. The synchronicity of my life, because this is my life. I mean, I spend every waking minute pursuing this. And I think when I'm not awake, I think I'm pursuing it. And I have been led to knowledge in the most synchronistic way. But in the first few years after 1990, 91, very few years, I would be led to knowledge, and then I would conclude what the situation was as a result of that knowledge, that information. And then it switched quite early, really, probably 94 at the latest, and I would know something. And then the names, dates, places, confirmation, this world information would follow. And that's what's been going on ever since. When I just said that we live in a simulation and the limit of it at this level is the speed of light, that just came, I just knew it. And then at that time, there was only one guy. I went looking for, people that were saying the same. I only found one, a guy called Nick Bostrom at Oxford University. But he was talking about it was a simulation, quite possibly, but he wasn't seeing it the same way that I do. But there was no one else. And now, many, many, many increasing numbers of mainstream scientists have come out and said, it looks like we live in a simulation, not least because once you grasp that and its implications, the so-called great mysteries of life disappear. Why things happen and how things are possible. Why things appear out of nowhere and disappear into nowhere, as people say, I saw this UFO, it came out of nowhere and disappeared into nowhere. All these things can be explained once you grasp that it's a simulation and this is just a frequency band within it. And I also just get these knowings. And what I've been having since 1990 are what I call coma sleeps, where I'll just basically, in the middle of the day, I'll just go into a coma sleep, maybe 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. And when I come out of it, and sometimes it takes almost as long to come out of it as you're in it, then you know something. You know something that you didn't know before, but you don't know what. And then in the days that pass, suddenly you're getting these insights out of nowhere, which you basically downloaded in the coma sleep. And about a week ago, I went to have a sleep. I was just overwhelmed by just exhaustion. I couldn't get my eyes open. So I went and laid on the bed about, 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I went into a coma sleep, the like of which even for me I've never experienced. And I got up after about 3 hours, and I walked into the front room and I sat down, and I was still coming out of it. I was really still in it, and I tried to start a bit of work. No chance. I had to stand up and go back to bed. I was still in it, and I think it was another 2 hours. I lay there in a coma sleep, and when I woke up, it took me a very long time to really come out of it. And ever since then, as the days have passed, I've had a stream of insights which has made what is happening and where it's coming from, how and why, more and more simple and crystal clear in my mind. So this and also I know a sequence because it's repeated over and over again. You must have had the same, whereby suddenly a subject will come into your life out of nowhere, like for the first time. Oh, that's interesting. And then suddenly information about that same subject keeps coming to you from all angles from then on. This has happened to me so many times. And it's happened to me in the last 18 months, 2 years, in relation to this afterlife continuation of the simulation. I came across it because of things that were happening in my life were very, very strange and paranormal, which I explained in what they were in the book. And then, once that subject of afterlife manipulation and where the manipulation is coming from, suddenly it's coming at me from all angles. So that's how it happens, really. And in the end, the confirmation of accuracy of the information is basically decided by what happens. So when I was saying about current events coming like 20, 25 years ago, it was like, yeah, you're mad and all that stuff. And then they happen. And you think, well, I knew this was going to happen. And the same sequence that I knew this was going to happen is the sequence that's led me to write the trap about this afterworld control system. And you're absolutely right in what you're saying about this light. I go into in the book what this light actually is. You see, light, what is light? Well, what is the simulation, first of all? The simulation at this level is electromagnetic light. And, when it says in Genesis about God creating the world in 7 days, let there be light. I think what's being described there is the creation of the simulation. And I explain why I think that in the book. It's an area that once you get into it, the mysteries of life, there are endless. Oh, so that's what that is. So that's why they do that. So that's what that really means. It's something I've come to recognize because it's happened for so long, and it's happened in this case again. And, one of the things that I've really been guided to by this synchronicity and information coming on the same subject is that actually AI, which is now becoming more and more of the control system in the third dimension, the human world, is actually an extension of the AI that's running the simulation. And it's running the simulation from what we call the lower astral. And it's my view, as I explain in the book, that every human life, every soul incarnation is monitored by, it's not the same as the one in our world, but it's the theme is exactly the same, by a gigantic AI operation. Everything is being recorded in AI. And, people say, well, hold on a minute, that's ridiculous, that's not possible. Well,
it is possible.
What's possible and what you believe is possible is not actually necessarily the same thing. But what I do is I point people to China, 1.5 billion people, and the scale on which AI, just human world AI, is tracking the population in enormous numbers in real time. There's an operation in America called the Sentient World Simulation, which is a real-time simulation of what's happening in the world, minute by minute. All the information is being fed to it, and it's changing as the information is fed to it. And these patterns of what is going to happen, if things don't change on the basis of what's happening now, this will happen. That information is available to this cult. So they are able to look at what is happening now, how people are responding and all that, and say, well, if things are left as they are, this is what's going to happen. So that's not exactly what we want to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to tinker with, we're going to change the way things are now by our manipulation, so that the projected outcome is the one that we absolutely do want. So they have that information to do that. This is when you're into, pre-crime and all that stuff, like Minority Report, that whole concept. And then when I was writing the book, I got this overwhelming feeling again, and I was looking at this whole area that we're just talking about. And what I got over and over, Akashic Records, Akashic Records, Akashic Records, look at the Akashic Records. Now, I came across the Akashic Records when, like in 1991, when I was trying to understand what the hell was happening in my life. But I didn't really look into it, and I just left it alone. And of course, it was popularized by Icke about the Akashic Records. So I started reading about the Akashic Records in more detail when I was writing the book, and this was happening to me. And I was reading actually on the Icke website how it was being described in computer terms, in database terms, that the Akashic Records is like a database that records everything, every conversation, everything that's ever happened, everything has an Akashic record, et cetera, et cetera. And I looked at it and I thought, what they're calling the Akashic Records is the frickin' database. It's the database. So the whole thing, this reality, this simulation, it's not people, there's not, non-human entities sitting there on a bloody piece of technology pressing buttons. It's run by AI. The very AI that's coming in, the very AI they want to connect to the human brain. Hello. And everything is recorded. Everything about a soul's, quote, incarnation is known because it's on the database. So if you believe in a certain deity, when you leave the body, AI in your reality will produce the deity. So near-death experiences say, a Christian will say, I saw Jesus. A Muslim might say, I saw Muhammad. And you see loved ones. And the loved ones, you read all these things that near-death experiences talk about. You see loved ones, and they draw you into the light tunnel. Now, what happens again and again, you read these accounts, they go through the tunnel, they feel this bliss, absolutely a doddle to simulate through frequency manipulation. I met a mind controller in America some years ago, and he said, I could get any two people to fall deeply in love with each other, even though in normal terms they couldn't stand each other and would be repulsed by each other, just by stimulating certain chemicals in the brain, which they do through frequencies. All right, so this manipulation is absolutely possible. So you see your loved one, and your loved one draws you up the tunnel. Now, what happens with their death experiences is there is this point where they're told, if you cross this, sometimes it symbolizes a wall, sometimes there's an archway, whatever, then you can't go back. But of course, near-death experiences do come back, so they don't cross that line. What is on the other side of that line? Well, if you read the accounts of people under hypnosis in the between life state, it's another hierarchy where people are told what to do, souls are told what to do. It's not a place of freedom. It feels more free than this world. This is why they kind of eulogize over it when they leave the body. it feels freer, but actually, in fact, it's a recycling operation back into this reality. And so the tunnel of light is the way to be recycled. You are absolutely right. What your Native American friend said. Don't go to the light, because it's a trap.
When you just went into that answer and went on that journey, I must say I can't remember a conversation where I had as many synchronicities. And every time I hear truth, really brings tears to my eyes. One of the things you said, when everything is recorded and monitored, it's such an interesting thing, because I do believe I came here with a mission. I think you came here with a mission, as did everybody else. Whether they remember it or not is a different story. But I remember before starting to really fully live my mission, I would have all these weird rocks thrown in my path. It was like this AI simulation was trying to prevent me from living that mission. And I felt it. I just couldn't understand why it was happening. And the more I walked my mission path, the less it started happening, because, the more I was in line with my soul's mission. At least that's how I interpret it. But it's so interesting now thinking back how many things were done to prevent me from doing that. Why do you think, and this is all so clear when you speak about it, why do you think we have such a strong urge and such a strong feeling that we want to help everybody else and wake and help people awaken to these truths, when we could just worry about getting out of this cycle ourselves? What do you think it is that wants us to help set everybody free?
Well, I mean, this is my view. I think people have got caught in the idea of soul. I think they got caught in it. It's a term for a expression of consciousness, if you like, a field of consciousness that actually, quote, incarnates and has the experience. But it's still in a state of separation. It's still within the simulation. So I use a distinctly a different term to soul when I'm talking about the true self, and that I call it spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Native Americans talk about the great spirit. And for me, spirit is that level of us that is outside the simulation, that is in fantastic expanded awareness of its true nature. And soul is a still in separation vehicle for entrapment. And so, the manipulators are quite happy for you to talk about soul, because the soul is still in the simulation. But spirit, the true I, that's when they get jumpy, because that's not an expression of the simulation. And I think the expressions of spirit have come into this reality specifically to call out what it really is and help people to escape its clutches, because all the clutches are perceptual. Control perception, you control behavior. Control perception, you control frequency. And so you come in, and I said many years ago, I said, this code knows more about me than I do. And I don't think that's true now, but it certainly was, because I was like, what's going on? And so when I started to very publicly awaken, I was obviously hit with years and years of historic levels of ridicule. When then that didn't work, was kept going, they turned to demonization and abuse. And now, which is the best part in a way, it's certainly a compliment, the mainstream of the system completely ignores me. It won't even mention me, hardly at all, because it doesn't want to give me any kind of platform, even by abusing me. And, you know, I said on an interview in 2020, in London Real interview, I think, that these people are terrified of me. And I knew they were. I knew they were then. And the reason is they're terrified of anyone who is being in any way successful in awakening the slaves, serving currently the interests of this cult and its masters, waking them up from that coma which keeps them in servitude. This is why, although there's some really, really bad things that have happened, really bad things, my God, since the COVID hoax was played, it's been a massive wake-up call for so many people. And, you know, my problem now, as it has been for so many years over the period of generating any interest in what I've got to say, it's now coping with the interest. So there's many, many good things happening. And I do feel a change. All right, yes, this cult is increasingly the cornered rat, I think, because there's other levels of reality that are pushing out against them, not just people in physical bodies. And they're pushing on because they know, what else can they do but push on? They know nothing else. But I do think the tide is turning, because certainly the energetic tide is turning against them. And I've never been more optimistic. Challenges by the bucket load that are coming, never been more optimistic that this is going to be successful. We are going to bring this nonsense down by removing that which holds it together, which is human ignorance, manipulated, systematic human ignorance of self and the world that we live in, and who controls the world we live in. Those ignorances, if you like, are what holds the whole thing together. And when they're removed, it must fall apart. I would rather be me than Klaus Schwab, put it that way.
I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting, when you said earlier, you too went through another layer of awakening and continue to, but 2 years ago, or at the beginning of the COVID era, or 2020, another layer of awakening happened. And we felt the same way. Was another slumber, to wake up from another slumber, see it even more clearly and in more dimensions. And so now, as you say, I feel like we're in another one of these eras where it's happening. And it's happening to all of us on different levels, depending on where people stand. It's clear, but people ask us, and our audience would be angry with me if I didn't ask. With all the physical challenges in the physical world or digital world that we are approaching, with people see it now, a social credit system that's supposed to be implemented, maybe through this new emergency state, monkeypox, and what's coming, and climate, and all these different emergencies that are moving in. Do you see the human family going through another COVID-like reaction state, or do you think that this time around it won't quite happen this way? Do you think we have evolved enough, collectively speaking, to deal with it differently?
Well, I think it's numbers. Indeed are some people just, again, following the same cycle they did before? Well, the answer must be yes, because people are lining up in places like Westchester, New York, I saw a report about, for the monkeypox vaccine. So the asleep will do asleep things. The difference is the numbers who will do it. I was very interested to see a clip with Anthony Fauci, who, let's not, pull punches is a psychopathic mass murderer, not just over, quote, COVID and the fake vaccine, but it's going way back to AIDS and many other things. And he was saying and kind of brewing the fact that because of anti-vaxxers and misinformation and people being tired of COVID, people weren't doing what they were told anymore. And, you know, it's a very simple equation. If 8 billion say no, then the tiny few trying to manipulate them cannot make them do things that they want them to do. They simply can't. The numbers game alone just destroys the ability of the few to manipulate the many. And there are far, far more people now than there ever has been who are deeply skeptical of authority and doing what authority tells them. And, you know, you've got a very, very vehemently angry group which doesn't get the opportunity to express itself, but you can see it if you look around. And they are the people that did do what they were told. They did believe what they were told about this fake vaccine. And they had it. And some of them died. Some of them have had their lives, health destroyed forever. Others, all of them have families that have watched it. And others have had the fake vaccine. They may have had some side effects, but they realize that it's not protected them from anything. And they are very, very angry at what's been done to them and how they've been manipulated. So, you know, you put that lot together and you're talking about a very, very large number of people, more than ever before, who are skeptical enough of authority and suspicious enough of authority and have no confidence in what authority tells them, that they won't be an easy push next time. So it's more and more difficult for them. And so what they're trying to do is to create dependency on the authorities through economic collapse. That's in part what in massive part actually, what the lockdowns were about. If you take back this economic dismantling that's going on now, and you take it back to the start, well, you can really pick it up with the COVID lockdowns. That's what threw the spanner in the works of the economy worldwide. Of course it would. You're shutting everything down. What did you expect? They knew this was going to be the case. And what they've done by justifying stopping pipelines and fossil fuel excavations and looking for new sources on federal land, for instance, in America, and moving away from fossil fuels to totally inadequate so-called alternatives, is they've created an energy dependency on outside sources. What they've then done is systematically provoke those sources, in this case Russia, to do what they've done. They then say we have to have sanctions against Russia because of what they've done. And the effect of those sanctions is not to harm Russia, it's to harm the Western economy and people living in the Western world, which the whole plan is to dismantle Western society, which is what I've been saying for all these years was the plan. So when you are focused on trying to put food on the table, trying to afford fuel to do what you need to do, then your focus is on that, and it's not on many other things that would be detrimental to the cult if the focus was on that, like what the hell is going on and who's doing it to what end. They are throwing at us everything to break our spirit. That's what basically the collective reason for everything is to break our spirit, so we become subservient to do what we're told. And that's what I've been saying all these years, is the plan to dismantle the economy, to stop the ability of people to have an independent income, independent of the authorities, so that they can introduce a guaranteed income on the basis of there's no other way that people can earn anything because everything's fallen apart. And this guaranteed income will come with the proviso that to get it, you've got to conform. And if you don't conform, you won't get it. And by the way, how else are you going to earn money to put food on the table? Because we've destroyed everything else. That's the plan. That's what the World Economic Forum plan and Klaus Schwab is all about. They're telling you that now, that's what the plan is. And so if you look at the climate change hoax and the COVID hoax, and you look at the, quote, solutions to both, they're the same. They're the centralization of power over every area of our lives, and the dictatorial imposition of that power. That's what it is. I mean, you know, if you are in a position whereby the food chain is being dismantled, the food supply chain, and then you tell Dutch farmers in a country that's the second biggest exporter of food in the world, that you are going to introduce rules and regulations that will absolutely destroy them, and then you're going to take their land away, then you're not making a mistake. This is not incompetence. This is coldly calculated. But there's other ways of looking at this. For instance, if you were being subtle, you wouldn't do something as obvious as what they're doing in Holland. And they want to do something similar in Canada, of course, elsewhere. You wouldn't do that. You try to hide it. But when you come out and say we're introducing this legislation which is going to destroy farmers, and everyone knows it's going to destroy farmers, well, that's not trying to hide it. And I think one reason for that, may not be the only reason, but one big reason, is these people are now in a state of panic. You see, when you're hiding what you're doing under the radar, you can kind of relax because you're pushing your agenda on, but you're not alerting anybody. So the pushback is, I mean, I know this because I've been pushing back for 32 years. I know how little pushback there's been over the years up to this point. Because people, they couldn't directly see it. They didn't directly experience it. So I'm not really bothered, mate. Oh, it's just a theory. But there comes a point, I said this was coming a long time ago, where if you're going to change society in the way that you want, there comes a point where society changes in the way you want. You can't hide it anymore. So what you have to do is move from hiding it to selling it. And this is what these lunatics at the World Economic Forum and others have been doing. They've been trying to sell it as a good thing. You'll own nothing, but you'll be happy and all this. However, once you break the surface and you put yourself on public display, which is pretty much what happened in the first few months of 2020 with the COVID hoax. They put themselves on public display. I said in one of those early interviews in 2020 that these people have now entered the room where they can be seen, and they've just heard the frickin' door click shut behind them. And that's what's happened. And so now they are having to try to get the points of control, not least through AI, into place as fast as possible, because they know that the longer they take to really shut everything down, the more people are going to awaken to what they're doing and the more trouble they're going to be in. So they're trying to rush it. Look at the speed they're trying to bring everything in. And in many ways, the Dutch government just announcing we're going to destroy farmers in the second biggest exporter of food in the world is an expression of that panic, of that need to push on, because they know that the longer they take to do it, now they're on public display, the more or less chance they have of reaching their goal, because enough people will wake up and see it and stop cooperating with it. So, these are interesting times. And, terrible as they are, there's an enormous amount to be encouraged by. If people were now as asleep as they were in the spring of 2020, we would be up the creek without a bloody paddle. We'd be up the creek without a canoe. But that's not the case. So there's lots of things to be encouraged by, as well as lots of challenges coming.
I almost think that you've been saying this for many, many years, problem, reaction, solution. That's the name of the game. This could almost be the problem for them is the awakening. Their reaction is this accelerated implementation of all these things. And our solution is to withdraw all the energy and take it back to where it needs to be, the empowerment of ourselves rather than giving all our energy to them. So I think it's a reversal of your beautiful example. And I know, David, you are pressed for time. I know you're very busy, so I want to, if I may, I want to ask two more questions, if that's okay.
Can I just make one quick point?
Absolutely.
One of the things I think we've not got to fall into is another trap. And that's thinking that these people are all powerful and highly intelligent. They're not. They're not. Look at Klaus Schwab. Look at him. Look at Fauci. Look at Gates.
They operate in a very tiny box.
These are not intelligent people in states of expanded consciousness. By its very nature, the consciousness in the lower levels of the astral fourth dimensional realm are freaking stupid. They're not very bright. They're not. Please, let's give them the power they don't have. Because if we do, we give them the power we have and thus give them power that they wouldn't otherwise have if we didn't. If we don't see them in this kind of, oh my God, they're so powerful terms, and we realize their true nature. You look at, have you seen George Soros recently? He's pathetic. He can hardly get the bloody words out. Oh, Soros is funding this, Soros is funding that. No, Soros, his name is fronting up all that funding. Someone else is doing it, not him. Just a gopher. And how this has happened, what they've done, is they have created a situation in which they, who are not very bright, by expanded awareness terms, they're idiots. The way they have manipulated humanity and manipulated themselves into a state of power, if you like, is by hoarding knowledge about reality, about how the whole thing works, about the fact what they're doing and who's doing it, who they are. And that's passed on through the generations, through the inner core of the secret society network, the global cult. At the same time, they've set up an information situation for the general population via the education system that they created and controlled, via the media they created and controlled, and via Silicon Valley, which they created and controlled, to keep the public in ignorance of what they know. And so it's very, very appropriate that their major symbol is the all-seeing single eye. For this reason, In the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And what they've done, the one-eyed man symbolically, not very bright, is to keep their target population blind to their one eye. And when humanity becomes the two-eyed, third-eyed, incredible potential consciousness that we are, it's over. It's over. And what they've done is manipulated us to give us their power, because they don't have any. And when that penny drops, then it is over, and that's what we're working towards.
Every day, in every way. And one thing, just to make it so easy to understand for everyone, as you say this, the lower level entities attach themselves to humans by manipulating us into those lower vibrational states like fear and worry and panic, which they're constantly projecting. And it's very easy to understand that when you are in that state, you have a very limited access to any creative solutions in your life, because you are in fight or flight. That's what they want, because that's where they operate. So as soon as you extend outward and above this state, you get into more creative layers where they have no access to. And you can totally confirm that in your own life. When you do that, when you move out of that state of fear, you become creative again. You access greater states of awareness.
Yeah, people have said to me, they've said, why are you still alive? Why haven't they taken you out? And my response has always been, because they can't. They can't. And they can't because I'm not in their frequency realm. If I was, they could. This is, if you look at the energetic level, if they can't, this world of the so-called physical, it's just a projection, a holographic projection of information fields, just like holograms are projections of information on the holographic print. And therefore, if they can't connect with you on an energetic level, they cannot connect with you in the world of the seen, because the world of the seen is just a projection of the information field. If they can't get you here, they can't get you there, because one and the other are different expressions of the same thing. So what they're trying to do, as you point out, is to pull us into a frequency state in which they can attach to us. And when they attach to us, they can possess our thoughts and our emotions. This is what possession is, absolutely real. And they can manipulate us, and they can connect with us on that energetic level. Why they're terrified of people awakening, particularly opening the heart and awakening, is because we're lost to them then. Because we're not on the same frequency as them, and if they can't get us here, they can't get us there. What they can do is make life difficult for us as best they can by through that which they can attach to, your legal profession and your system people. They can try to make life difficult for you that way through people they control, but they can't control you because they can't attach to you. That's the point. And if they can't attach to you, they can't take you out, because they can't enter your realm. They can't enter your frequency realm. And if they can't do it on a frequency level, they can't do it on the projection of that frequency level, which is the holographic world. This is why I say, why don't they take me out? Because they can't. And yes, they can't. They never will be able to. And the reason they're seeking to ignore me and just crack on, I don't exist now, is because they're terrified of me. Just as they're terrified of anyone who is beyond them, in frequency terms beyond them. People, therefore, they can't control. They can try to make life difficult for them, they can try to censor them through people they do control, but they can't actually stop them because they're not in the realm that can do that. and never will be one in the state they're in, which is pathetic.
Well, 100% is how we feel every day. I'm going to get to the final question. You call it a simulation, and there's other ways to describe it, but we all feel there is a grit. There is something that has our grip. And as you say, when we move through these layers of frequency and come higher up, it is my belief that this grit, this simulation, will dissolve, and I don't know how, but it will dissolve, and we will actually experience what you might call prime reality, whatever that is, and as you say, infinity in all of its glory and beauty. So today, people are become, through their spiritual practices, but also through their practical deeds every day. A lot of people, millions now, are looking for ways to make that happen in their own lives, and it is as much inner work as it is becoming self-sufficient, independent, reconnecting with what we perceive to be nature anyways, because it harmonizes us. At least it does it to me. It harmonizes me with the Great Spirit. Do you think that this reharmonization with nature as we perceive it, and the self-sufficient movement, people becoming, going back to more simpler ways of living, and community and family and local groups, do you think that this is a or the path? And do you see that being a viable solution for a future moving forward?
I think that this simulation is what the Gnostics called back in the 400 AD before in Egypt, and the writings have been found in Nag Hammadi in Egypt, about 80 miles north of Luxor, in 1945 in an earthen jar, which confirmed this. They believed that they talked about what they called a bad copy, that this world was a bad copy of prime reality. And when you read those texts and bring them into the current world, the modern world, they were describing a simulation. What they were describing. And so for me, this is what has basically happened. You have a prime reality, or let's put it another way. You have a website. You take a copy of the website. Now you've got a copy of the original website. The original website goes on existing as it always has, in the form that it always has. But now you have a copy, and you can start changing it. You can start changing it so it becomes less and less like the original website. And what I feel, having looked at this in so much detail over so long, is that a copy of prime reality was taken. It's like a digital copy, imagine that. And so prime reality continues to exist, and in a much more higher frequency, high dimensional way. But this is or was originally a copy of it. And what they're doing is they're changing the copy. This is why they're changing the atmosphere. They're changing everything more and more. And so sometimes when people have near-death experiences, they say that they experience an earth which is kind of like this one, but totally different. All the colors are more vibrant, people are happy, people are joyous. And so I do think that what's happened is that a simulated copy of prime reality, not the entirety of prime reality, but just one section of it, has been overlaid, and that humans have been tuned into it. So the manipulation of the human form has tuned us in to the bad copy. And it literally is, going back to what I said earlier, symbolically, well, very close to literally, they have manipulated us to put the headset on in a virtual reality game. So imagine you're standing in prime reality, and you've got a head cell, you're not experiencing prime reality. You're experiencing what the headset is feeding you as your reality, as your information of who you are, where you are, etc. That's what's happening, because this stimulation is not a physical construct. It's a information source. It's like a field of information which we're constantly not just downloading but interacting with, like an interactive cosmic Wi-Fi. And so if you go through your whole life with a headset on and never take it off, then the headset information becomes your reality. That's basically what's happening. And the body, the five senses, what we touch, see, etc., is an expression of the simulation. It's designed to interact with the simulation. And so the simulation seems so real to us because we're actually in a, quote, body that is part of the simulation. And so the answer is to go from the body to consciousness, which is potentially beyond the simulation. And so when you do, you start tapping in to prime reality, which is feeding you a different reality to simulated reality. Imagine if a mind was in a Wi-Fi field, and the Wi-Fi field was feeding it its reality. That's basically what's going on. And we're decoding that reality from waveform, which is what the field is, the simulation field, through the five senses. The five senses take waveform information. They turn it into electrical information, which is fed to the brain, and then the brain decodes that through various parts of the brain that specialize in sight, hearing, taste, smell, etc. And the brain takes that electrical information and it decodes it into holographic information. So this external world that we experience is not external at all. It's all going on in here. And what's, if you like, external is the waveform field, which we are decoding into what seems to be an external world, but is actually not. If you look at a computer in a Wi-Fi field, what it's doing, it's taking information from a radiation field and it's decoding it and putting it onto the screen in a totally different form. That's what we're doing. That's how we decode the matrix. And where is the decoding going on? I'm looking at this screen now of this computer. It's not external to the computer, what I'm looking at. It's internal to the computer. So the computer is decoding the Wi-Fi field from a radiation form into pictures, graphics, words, etc., colors, inside the computer. That's what we're doing. And if you take the Matrix as a example, Matrix movies, when they enter the Matrix, they don't enter it with their bodies, they enter it with their minds. Their bodies stay outside the Matrix, that in their Matrix film symbolism. They put the probe in the back of the neck, actually in the reptilian brain area, and their mind goes into the Matrix, not their body. And I say in the book, I mean, this gets really deep with this bit. I say in the book that, we think that those that believe in any kind of life beyond human, that we incarnate into the body. I say the mind is not in the body is in the mind. It's all mind. This now is my mind. My mind's decoding. And yet, you create a feedback loop between bewildered consciousness and body, in which the mind perceives it's in the body when the body is in the mind. And because the mind perceives it's in the body, it perceives the body is the governor of reality. So, for instance, if a doctor says you've got 6 months to live, even though the body's in the mind and the mind has control over the state of the body, if only we realize it. Invariably, I think it's about 80% of the time, the doctor's prognosis, 6 months to live, the person dies within 6 months. And I've read stories of people who've been given a life to live prognosis by a doctor. They've died within it. And the post-mortem has found that they didn't have what the doctor said they were going to die of. Realizing that even at that level, the body is part of the matrix, and that the mind has the power to override the matrix, including the body, is fundamental to taking control back of our reality. The rabbit hole goes on, getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And we are entering a time now, I do that in the trap to a large extent, but going deeper now, after that, where almost everything that humans, even those in the forms of awakening, have ever believed is going to be revealed to have been different states of the same illusion.
And that is the trap.
Yep.
And that is the trap from beginning to infinity. David, thank you so much for all of your work. Thank you so much for taking the time. Congratulations on this new book, which I can't wait to read. As always with your books, and then probably what's going to happen is we're going to give it away to someone who we feel would benefit greatly from reading The Trap. We'll put the link in the description. Inspire Tribe, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for asking your questions. I encourage you to go and order this book, and I know David has they have sort of a collection way of ordering all of his books, I think. I would encourage you to do that. It's an absolutely amazing journey.
Also, just very quickly, I'm one chapter I'm going to finish on Monday from finishing an audio book where I actually read the book in an audio version. And
wonderful for those who don't like the reading but love listening. A wonderful option too. We'll put all the links in the video description. David Icke. Sometimes I don't know if I can find the words of gratitude to express for all the work that you've done over so many years and decades. And it's something Christine and I have said to Dr. Wakefield when he came on the show, is the way we have raised our children has absolutely changed because of the information and the wisdom we received from him. And it's the same with your information and wisdom. Our children grew up differently because of what you brought to the world. And I want to thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. They have greatly benefited from it. We all have.
That's so nice to hear, because if we get the children right, we get the world right. That's why they're targeting the kids.
Absolutely. David Icke, thank you again for coming on today. Thank you for everything your family does. Inspire Tribe, thank you for being here with us. We love you. We appreciate you, and we'll be back with you again very, very soon.